Once upon a time, stories of fantasy. People suffering with OCD aren't living a fantasy. Even though there are a lot of myths that go around obsessive compulsive disorder, their stories are real. These are stories from the OCD side. Real people, real stories, brought to you by FamilyOCD.com and InvisibleWheelchair.com. We want your story. Go to InvisibleWheelchair.com and contact us to tell us your story here. OCD is real. OCD treatments are real. OCD recovery is real. And so are these stories. Jenna Overbaugh is a licensed professional counselor and therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety at OCD, an online OCD specialized therapy group. Previously, she worked as a therapist in a clinical setting with Rogers Behavioral Health, a residential recovery unit for OCD and anxiety. She has a love of being a podcaster, Instagrammer, certified personal trainer, and especially a mom. Now, let's get to her story. So Jenna, thank you so much for being part of the Stories from the OCD Side, which is part of the Invisible Wheelchair podcast. It's so neat to have you here. I've been looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am excited to talk a little bit more about my story and hopefully reach some other people out there who are struggling with it.
Well, the reason I was kind of excited about doing this was because I think it's going to, one, be an inspiration to others to see that OCD affects all walks of life, all ages, everything. You know, somebody who is a therapist that treated it is now gone through it, and I think that's important for people to see that it doesn't have barriers that stop it from certain people. So, could you tell us your story? I would love to hear your story about what you went through with OCD yourself.
Absolutely. So I totally agree with everything that you've said, which is how I say it is that OCD is, no one is immune to OCD. And my story really brought that to light. So I have been working with people who have OCD and anxiety for now 10 or 12 years. It's really all I've ever done. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And so it was always the focus of my graduate school studies. It was the focus of my internships. I've worked at residential centers. I now work at NOCD. And so it's all I've done, written, published articles on it, conferences, you name it. And so as I prepared to start my family back in 2018, when I was preparing to have my first child, he's now 3. I thought going into it, yes, I know about the potential for postpartum OCD. I know about the potential for postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, but I'm good. Like, I know everything that you should do in those situations. I feel like I have all the armor necessary, and I'm just going to put up my armor and block it all out. And I feel like I am not even just protected. I felt truly that I was immune to it, and that I would know exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. And then, I was just so naive looking back. Then I have my baby on Valentine's Day, 2018, and it was a horrific experience. It was, I think, traumatic and in a lot of ways, nothing that I expected it to be. That was just really the beginning of reality changing forever. I remember the first intrusive thought that I started having related to my baby was when we brought him home and I was just changing him, putting socks on him. And I had this intrusive thought, if you put socks on him, you'll break his ankles, either on purpose, you'll just lose your cool, or you'll just get so frustrated with him and your new life that you'll just lose your cool and just snap his ankles. Or of course on accident, just because he's so fragile. And of course, you'd think that, okay, I'm an OCD specialist. I've been doing this for so long. Obviously you need to keep putting his socks on. No way. I was like, nope, no. I'm not doing this. Heck no. I remember very vividly going and getting my husband and saying I can't put his socks on. I am just really freaking out right now that I'm going to lose my cool and I feel like I'm going to snap his ankles. My husband, who ironically is also an ERP therapist and works in this field, he gave right into me we know about accommodation and we know better. But me having my anxiety that felt so real in that moment and him truly wanting to just help me and help me feel better, we started breaking all of the rules. As truth would have it, as OCD would have it, it didn't stop there. And so it just spiraled onto numerous other things. Because I had to spend so much time in the hospital, my husband didn't have more than like 48 hours at home with us. My safety net was gone at that point. Like then I really quickly had to learn how to do everything myself, like bath time, changing, all those things. Started to have a lot of really taboo, what people would call our sexual intrusive thoughts. Like, what if I just lose my cool here and what if I just lose control of my impulses and I like kiss him or make out with him? Or what does it mean about me that I'm having these thoughts when I'm changing his diaper? And I just became really avoidant of little things like changing his diaper. And of course, I could go on and on forever about these little examples, but it grew and it grew as OCD does. And the fire just continued to expand. And it got so bad. I mean, I was struggling for probably a year and a half before I ever sought therapy, before I ever got help. I was just so in it and so deep in it that I thought like, this isn't going to get any better. And there was a point where I was like, who am I going to see? Like, who am I going to see? The therapists who I refer my clients to all the time, like my coworkers, who's going to help me? I just kept trying to do it on my own and suck it up. And it never, ever went away. The two scariest things that happened that really brought me to the point where I was like, I have to seek someone, I have to get help, was I started to have these fears that I was going to like purposefully or on accident leave him in public places. Mm-hmm. And so I would reach around and check to make sure he was in his car seat, but then that wasn't enough. I would have to like call for him and make sure that like I could hear him. And eventually that wasn't enough. I started to like pull over in the middle of the highway, like on the side of the highway, and have to physically like take him out of his car seat to make sure that he was there. Like it wasn't enough for me to see him. It wasn't enough for me to touch him. It wasn't enough for me to hear him. I had to like activate all of my senses in order to be like, okay, he's here. And of course I knew he was. It's just the OCD was like, well, what if? What if? I started, like most moms, most parents, you know, the sleep deprivation really gets to you. So it's like, am I that tired that I could have like slammed his head against the wall without me knowing it? Like, and so I would have that thought and spend hours just like observing his head. And I remember having to like wake my husband up in the middle of the night. Like, you need to check his head. I feel like I could have hurt him in my sleep and I don't know. And so obviously it got so bad that I did call a therapist and finally get in. They said it would be like 6 weeks for me to see someone. And I was like, that's not going to happen. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like I needed you 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad that I went through therapy and I'm so much better now, but it really drove me to want to help people in the OCD community even more because one, I know how real it feels now. I remember even bargaining with God, like, God, I will never like minimize anyone else's fears ever again. I will never like roll my eyes at any client ever again if you just help me. Because I was like, I get it now. Obviously, like the six week waiting period when I was already in crisis was just ridiculous. No one should have to wait that long. I went to therapy and it's been great. And I still, I think on a day-to-day basis, have to live that lifestyle. But yeah, it's definitely made me a better mom and a better therapist for sure. 100%.
How did it affect your husband and your family? Did you see some effects for them too?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bond with my son was completely screwed up. Like he was constantly, you could tell. I mean, once I was in therapy and I was managing it so much better, he was calmer. He was less anxious. And then my husband, my poor husband, again, like he knew better. He knew not to accommodate me, but he was doing it because he was equally desperate in another sense. Like he just wanted me to feel better. He ended up, I'm sure, like losing a lot of confidence in himself, like not knowing personally what to do. Yeah, I mean, I was asking for constant accommodations. My big one was constantly asking him when he was going to be home from work. I would constantly say, like, when are you coming home from work? When are you home from work today? And I would like check the traffic. I would literally set timers like, okay, he left work now. It should be about 28 minutes until he's home. I would like sit by the window and watch for when he would be home, just because I didn't want to be alone with my son. Like, I just didn't want to be anxious. And as soon as I heard the garage door open, it was like wave of relief. I'm in the clear. I made it. I cannot tell you how many times I just rage texted him, like all in caps. Where are you? You were supposed to be home 20 minutes ago. Where are you? And that was just my anxiety, of course. I mean, I took a lot of that out on him, and I always felt like he had to parent two people. Like, he had to parent my son, and he also had to parent me, because I felt like I needed so much support.
Well, and I know for myself, I work with families and parents and kids now. It's easier to treat outside yourself, but when it's in your own family, we've been doing a lot of work with our kids, but it's harder when it's more personal, when it's that close to you. So I can imagine for your husband, it was tough to try to work with you in a family situation like that, versus him treating another patient, separately.
Yeah. And it was true for me too. I remember knowing logically what I needed to do. Like, Jenna, you need to put the socks on him. Like, you are home alone and you have to go to the grocery store. Like, it's in the middle of winter, you have to put socks on him. And I remember very clearly being like, nope, nope, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm giving into a ritual right now, and I don't care. This is way too important to me. I'm not going there. Like, I remember very vividly feeling that way, like, hell no, I'm not doing
Mm.
it. I see it 100% now. Like, having been there myself, I feel the hell no that I get from my members all the time.
When you went to therapy, what were the treatment methods that they used with you to help you through it?
So admittedly, I because of my unique situation and just where I live, like, I felt kind of trapped. Like, who am I going to go to? It was really a unique situation. There are already so few ERP specialists in my area, let alone like ones that I don't directly communicate with and have a relationship with already, because of either working with them or having them as a referral source. That added an additional layer of confusion and complicatedness for me. And so I did find what I thought was the next best thing, which was someone who specialized in postpartum issues. She was really awesome. We just did more general kind of CBT, but I kicked my own butt when it came to exposures. I came to session with my own hierarchy. I came to session with, like, these are the exposures that I'm doing myself this week. I think I still need to keep working on these exposures because it's still really anxiety provoking. And so I feel like I did a lot of that work myself. She helped me identify tons of things that I didn't realize that I was doing. Like, for instance, I was always really afraid of, like, him getting upset in the bath. Like, oh my gosh, if I get frustrated with him, I'm going to lose it and I'm just going to hit him. Of course, I never did. I never wanted to. It's just like, what if I lose control type thing? So I would do whatever I could to just like mediate these potential tantrums. And so what I would do is, like, I would constantly buy new toys for the bathtub, or new bath tablets, or new bubbles, or have a new song playing to moderate like his potential for tantrums, so that I felt better, that I wouldn't like lose my cool, right? And so she pointed that out to me very quickly, which is like, you need to just give him a bath. And like, maybe he has a temper tantrum, maybe he doesn't. Like, maybe you do lose your frustration, maybe you don't, but like, you need to learn that you don't constantly need to like safety protect yourself from these temper tantrums. So it was truly the most like life-changing experience of my life. And I just kicked myself in the butt that I waited a year and a half. But when you're in that moment, you get so down about it. And so I see that side of it too.
Well, yeah, and OCD is very strong in its messages, so it can control you. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I always told my husband it felt like a terrorist had hijacked my brain. Like, I know
Mm.
that this isn't me. Like, I know that this isn't what I want to be doing right now, but I feel like I can't help it. Like, it felt like I was being hijacked, truly.
Having gone through it now yourself, from what you've gone through, when you know somebody else is in that place and going in that place anyway, what advice from Jenna would you give them to do when they're feeling that same place. They're getting into that OCD and it's starting to take over.
Yeah. I would, first of all, I'm way more compassionate now than I was before. I think before, like my drill sergeant would come out where I'd be like, this is what's going on. You're being triggered right now. These are the intrusive thoughts that you're experiencing. We need to make sure that you're not ruminating, checking, asking for reassurance. And that's all you like. Now I would be so much more compassionate and like, this is terrible. And I know it feels like you're doing yourself a disservice by not doing these compulsions. I know it feels wrong on every level. And I would just probably talk to them about like all the things that their OCD is taking from them, right?
Right.
Like, sure, it feels good in that moment to not put my son's socks on him, but if I keep letting OCD win like that, like I'm never going to be able to get him outside. Like I'm homebound until my husband comes home. And I would just challenge them to ask themselves, like, I know it feels scary. I know it feels awful, but think about what it's taking from you. Like, and are you willing to continue to have your life flipped upside down because of these things that honestly we're not safe from anyway? Like my son could hurt himself. Like I could hurt my son whenever he's getting dressed, right? Like regardless of how careful I am, he still could hurt himself, especially now because he's 3 and he's a crazy person. like the reality is that whether we do these compulsions or not, our fear is still there. We could still harm our children. Our children could still be harmed. We could still snap and lose our cool. We have to be okay with that potential and not let our values be sucked up by these fears, because the potential for that fear is going to be there regardless, whether or not we do these rituals. And so it's just a matter of like, how much are you willing to give your life? How much of your life are you willing to give over to the OCD? Because it will continue to take more and more.
Well, Jenna, this has been wonderful, and I so much appreciate you telling your story because, like I said, I think it can be an inspiration to know that it affects all parts of all ways of life, and also I really thank you for being part of this and telling your story and being so open about it and vulnerable about it, because you've told some stuff that is not easy to tell. So I really thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And the last thing I would say to anyone struggling in that moment is there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your thoughts even, right? Like we've done research to show that everyone has intrusive thoughts. What's different and what's haywire is how we're off to the races to fix it, how we're off to the races to try to figure it out, how we're off to the races to fix that anxiety versus just making a decision about, okay, what am I going to focus on instead? Like, what am I willing and not willing to give my attention to? What am I willing and not willing to analyze here? And again, making sure that your values are always being won over and that you're not choosing OCD over your values.
So that is our story for this podcast. Remember, we want your story told here. If you want to tell us your success story or just want to tell us where you're at, simply go to www.invisiblewheelchair.com, then click on the Tell Us Your Story on the top left side, or just click the Contact Don button on the right side towards the bottom. We want to give you a voice to your story. Until next time, keep working on your story for a happily ever after ending.